Alright, well, we open up in June, and the Germans started things off. Remember, they had bombarded the fortifications out of this hex. French put some reinforcements in, but it still wasn't very much. It was only 8 strength points. The Germans attacked extra couple 8-point divisions in there, and got enough force in there, 70-something points, some 13 supply points because of all the artillery they've thrown into it. They managed to roll moderately okay. I think a 4. They're at -3 on this table. But the result ended up doing 7 of the 8 strength points. The 8th strength point in this would have fallen. They would have gotten the hacks. And it would have kind of opened up a breach in the line in a way that the French would have to react to and might end up causing some problems. Just in terms of shifting stuff over, it might open up an opportunity. In general, though, it probably wasn't a very valuable attack. The French spent 2 supply, the Germans spent 13. I'm not sure the Germans would have had enough to really exploit the attack because they had been kind of pushed heavily on their supply by the French attack, by the French offensive. We also got one of those, I think I pointed this out already, but one of those annoying factors in the reinforcement chart. These 4-5 units are reduced units. The numbering is correct on them, but this is why you will never know what you have if you stop using the numbering, because there are 4-5 units, right? There are units that, maybe not, but there are many ways to get a 4-5. I don't know. Anyway, those aren't listed as 4-5s. They're listed as 3-5s. I've put a strength reduction marker because I think that's what really is intended. What little gain you get out of actual units on the board that have to be pulled out and changed and filled out, etc., I think is so limited compared to, I don't know. You know, I wouldn't want to step back and not have the units, but the mechanism for delivering which pieces come in at what time is just too painful. Way too painful. And if you've got units that they're just going to indicate the strength point of as the unit, they're going to say it's a 3-5 when there is no unit in the countermix that has that 3-5 rating on it, neither reduced nor otherwise that I could find. But there are some units that on their reduced side are close to 3-5s. Well, what do? Do you put the reduction markers? Do you not? I don't know. Before I did it, leaving the unit without the reduction marker, then I started putting the reduction markers when I hit the mountain unit. That was an 8-5, and that was probably wise because there's probably a mountain unit somewhere that I couldn't find that actually fit that value. Although I think there was a 7-5, to tell you the truth. And there's no +1 strength markers. So either this needs to be really revamped in terms of... first of all, it needs to be revamped in terms of getting... making it more usable. But it also... the order of entry. But it also probably has actual just errors in it, from what I can see. Where there are not errors, where there are special conditions like this is a weakened unit, that should be noted if that's what's intended. A little asterisk, whatever. It doesn't have to take up a lot of room here. There aren't a lot of these units, but it's a real annoyance because I don't know if I'm putting the right stuff down, the intended stuff. It doesn't matter that much. But if it doesn't matter that much, I might as well just fudge it, and, you know, right? It matters about as much as actually having the units on the board and having to pull them out and cycle them, or else take the losses and build new units and put them in place, etc. It's just the whole thing, all the details that make this not just a pure strength point game add very little, but they do add something. But I don't feel like they make up for the additional pain that this chart perhaps provides and the uncertainty that it leaves you with. Because if you are fudging those, if you don't know, was that supposed to be 4-5s? Was it supposed to be full strength? Or am I supposed to have the strength point marker? Not knowing means I'm going to err a certain amount of the time, probably. Had to be explained in the entry order. And I don't know. I'm just really not sure how much I want to keep going with this, but okay. And the French too try opening up a different front. They moved an assault over here. Now that they have supplies, they saw what looked like kind of a weak point. It's going to be a lower drain on supplies to fight on only a 2 hex to the 1 hex front. Of course, the only reason it was attractive is the Germans didn't have it terribly well defended. The reason, some of it's the terrain. It's plain terrain. That was some of the advantage. No minus plus swap there. But some of it was also, hey, the French attacks have been here. We stripped some troops away from everything else. But it happened to be a weak spot in the terrain that was weakened. So it seemed like a good option. But the Germans can just flood that back in. Over here, the French aren't terribly better off than they were. They're up to 9 strength points there. That's the best they could manage. They've got more coming next turn. But the Germans may want to launch another round of attack, which they weren't planning on doing. But they're not seeing the significant numbers of French that they hoped to see, or that they were expecting to see in this area. They're not seeing a flood of troops moving over either. So the possibility of a breakthrough is still there. If they take that, they may be able to push into, well, no, that's a fortress. Yeah, there isn't much possibility of that. They'll be able to roll this hex then and have, equally strong positioning against it. But there's not really any great hole that's going to open up if they take that hex. It could give a significant strength against this hex, but there's the river line there, a lot of terrain. It's just not worth doing there. And after those couple little assaults on the first turn of June, we've reverted back to build up and try to prepare for the assault whenever it's going to come. I think I've spent enough that I may actually have been able to put off another month's for the offensive, but certainly a turn off one of the months is going to be put aside where it doesn't have to be done. I just don't know what to say there. As I did the German turn, it's just coming to mind the logistical aspect of balancing all the points, making sure the line's weak points are covered in light of all these withdrawals. And I mean, okay, so I'm not doing the required, the numerical unit withdrawal, which would be even worse. But I pick a unit out, and then I have to try to figure out how to shift my line around to make up for that little change. It's a level of annoyance. Now, one of my favorite games has something similar to this, Desert Fox, where you have to constantly keep your supplies. You have to keep counting up your troops and see if you have your supplies network set up so that it can feed the troops. Much, much more complex and annoying type of system than, say, the OCS has. But it is the glimmer to where the OCS is going with its supply rules. For that, I really find the game impressive. The supply rules are a step in the right direction, even if they were very, very complex in terms of the mechanical actions you have to take. Here, I don't feel like I'm gaining a lot by all this swapping troops in and out and everything. Yes, it historically happened, but it just, I kind of want to just say, okay, I'm sending my replacement points that way instead of to the west. The problem is the only thing that this is meant to represent to me is either getting the exact historical designations of the units that were in specific locations correct, or that fiddling is a key part of the game. That's part of this experience. That's what you want. And if it's the latter, well, it's not what I want. I don't like having to balance my forces in that sort of way, and I don't think that it's all that terribly realistic. But that's really what distinguishes this from a strength point, from a pure strength point game, is that you have to do this swapping in and out and trying to balance things. And, sometimes I'm making tactically bad decisions in an area just because I don't want more counters on the board. I don't want more headache developing in the future. So I take, some tactical risk to avoid that. Is that reasonable or not? I don't know. But it's certainly not the decision that I want to be making is, do I want to be burning my calculation abilities, limited as they are, on these tasks, or do I want to be, concentrating on something else? And for me, concentrating on something else is more important, so I just throw them into a headquarters and let them rot there for a couple turns as I try to figure out how to get them up to date. And I guess maybe that's the skill in this game, is managing that number crunching and constant counting all the time. I guess that's where maybe it appeals. I'm not sure. I've never liked that side of wargaming. After the German attack in this sector a while back, the French have decided to position a significant amount of forces. Now this is obvious. They telegraph their move every time they do it. Because they don't have the ability to rail right in there. Anyway, there's a weak spot kind of here, not terribly weak, and then the possibility of crossing the river where there's absolutely no troops, or maybe breaching here. Just some kind of forcing the Germans back in a front that they're not expecting an attack in. There's not a lot of value to any of this. I mean, it really doesn't make a difference. It's worse terrain to fight over, so if this starts to form into a breakthrough, it's not going to be as deep as what could have happened here. But what could have happened there isn't happening. So, the French are once again looking to see if they can divert another direction. One thing to note, it takes me a long time to get these turns played, but it's not that I'm playing a significantly large amount. The game itself actually at this point is moving very quickly. I'd say turns are taking, maybe a player turn takes maybe 10 minutes at most. So it's not this humongous burden here. It's just, there's not enough excitement, there's not enough things of interest to me going on to keep fueling my flavor. It could be a lot more detailed. I'd probably have given up if it was. But it's very hard for me to face something of this size that isn't really sparking much for me. So as I was saying, it doesn't take a lot of time to play the turns out until you have to withdraw a unit. And let's just take a look. We were talking about, it takes 5-10 minutes to play a player turn, right? All right. Well, looking for June's withdrawal. I'm not even done with it yet. 2-2-4 infantry brigades, 1 colonial, 2 colonial. Great. So I know they're going to look like this. They're going to have this kind of brown thing. Well, here was one of them. He was sitting right in the dead pile. Easy to see a 2-4. Great. I glanced at the others. There's a 3-4. Okay, well, whatever. Pretty sure that's not it. I went through every goddamn counter on the map. Every French counter. Twice, essentially. Before I went back to look, this one's not a 2-4, but it is on the back side, so you're expected to withdraw 2 strength points of that. This is the kind of crap, when you spend half your time playing in trying to find a piece or trying to shift things, the majority of the effort in this game is spent on such piddly little stuff. Again, maybe it works fine on Vassal. Anyway, what happens is these 2 units are going to be withdrawn, and I have to withdraw 4 replacement points. And you know what the net effect is? 4 strength points are gone from the map. That's it. We're keeping track of all the strength points on all the units, and it's just this mindless, pointless exercise. And continuing on my withdrawals, I managed, I'm getting very frustrated here, to pull these 4-4s off. Then I thought I screwed up trying to read this, and fine. This is me being frustrated here. I thought I was withdrawing from some other era instead. Anyway, that's fine. But then looking for a 3-4, a natural 3-4 that's actually on the map. And I don't think, there's a whole pile of dead ones over here, and if I couldn't find one, it would come off here. But I have to remove one of the ones, and here it means I have to remove from the Paris front, which I really did not want to do. And there's no way I would be withdrawing. So what does that mean? Well, that means I'm going to have to shift all kinds of troops or just say the hell with it. And again, I spent a good 15 minutes looking for a 3-4 under all the counters. Yeah. If there was an electronic coverage of this, if this was played on Vassal or whatever, and it is, it's available that way, it might be a perfectly fine game. And I've said this several times. But man, I don't know if anybody plays this in more than, I don't know. Playing the Schlieffen plan wasn't so bad. There was a lot going on. But here, there's nothing going on except that I'm piddling with these pieces all the time. I'm just constantly shifting them to no real end. It's just this, attempt to smooth the fronts out and make sure that I don't give too much of an advantage. And it's just this humongous headache. And we close out June. Nothing else happened. Just building up of forces. Basically, the French have quite a big army at this point. But, and the Germans have been filtering troops out, but they've also been getting things in, so not much has been moving there. Of course, the French have been pulling things out as they're putting things in, too, just to make the more work for everyone. I counted up my French points. It looks like I have 1 point too many to go 2 months. Which means, well, the French will attack perhaps on the last turn of July. Whether or not there's British help, I haven't decided yet. But I'm setting it up so that I've got a potential attack here or up here. I've got big enough armies that, I can put a lot of strength in a lot of different places. Now, of course, the French units are limited to 6s, but I've also got the artillery that I'm positioning to be able to give me that added oomph. And the hope is that, well, one of these places I'll be able to break, or maybe I'll be able to shift it and make an attack on this German unit, or something along those lines. There's a lot of flexibility towards doing any of these attacks, and if I can breach the line in one place, that's enough to kind of push forward and maybe force things back. This hex is still being ignored. Both sides have fortifications on the other side, so the trenches aren't really absolutely necessary, and pushing forward might mean losing some units for moving into that hex. It just doesn't seem worth it if you're not going to launch an attack to do so. Anyway, up this goes, and I'll set up the next month.